Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and I am pleased to introduce our guest from the other side of the pond, Brother Chris Jones. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. So, you've seen an episode or two of the podcast.
I have.
Right. So you understand how we work. So before we get into why you're on, which is very exciting, we want all of our followers to know who's Chris Jones, the man and not the Mason. So my friend, tell us who you are.
Okay. Wow. So I'm a 54-year-old English man living in Woodall Spa in Lincolnshire. So we live on the east coast of England. Married to Michelle, been married for over 30 years now. We have three grown-up children. Three grandchildren, 10-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Great fun, loving all of that. Currently not working. For 20 years of my life, up to about 5 years ago, I was running a school that I created myself for young people that were excluded from school. So challenging young people that were kicked out of school for all sorts of reasons. Right. I created a training center to start with my wife. We started it together and it became a big monster. So we ran this thing for 20 years. We had over 5,000 young people through us over the 20 years, teaching them vocational skills. So it was all about construction, engineering, all the kind of skills that potentially would get these kids jobs, right? It fried me, basically. I now understand that I just burnt out with it. I employed 40 people, mostly ex-military guys. I was in the Royal Engineers. So I kind of had the military background that enabled me to have that disciplined outlook to be able to do a job like that. And I employed mostly ex-guys and women that were from the forces, from the police, from the armed forces. But yeah, it melted me. So I ended up in a really bad place and ended up then having some therapy. And then it led on to what I ended up doing for the last 2 years. So yeah, I mean, at the moment, like I say, I'm not working. I'm about to write a book about the process I've just been through for the last 2 years and my learning about mental health. And then I guess that's probably going to be my job. So writing and traveling and Freemasonry.
I love it.
Squeeze my family in too, right?
Right. So let me pick or dissect this, what you just talked about. So one, I love that you're working with youth. You know, at the end of the day, those are going to be the folks that are making the rules and changing the world. Indeed. Secondly, the vocations, at least in the United States, you know, so many parents say, go to university, get this, instead of go to trade school, because trades, nobody's going after, and the trades are going to be able to write their own checks, at least in the United States. Same in England?
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a great setup. I also love that you're using prior military, using our veterans. I think that those are an underutilized resource globally.
Indeed.
So those are two great things, but those are awesome. The big thing that I think is men, and we're in the same age range, right?
Right.
I think if you go back 30 years ago, mental health was, you're weak, rub some dirt on it, all of those things. And I think that we have got past that stigma. Yes. And to know that you were at a place where you were fried and you sought the counseling. I think, forget Masonry, as men, as humans, if the listeners take nothing else away from this episode, I want them to take away is we're all there. We all get times where it gets a little dark. Yep. And if you don't want to go to professional help, start with your Masonic brothers, and then they're going to guide you to some professional help as well. So, Chris, I know I went a little deep early, but I want to point out where I think as men that we should accentuate some things.
Without a doubt, yeah. And I'd be honest with you, I didn't realize I was having problems. It was a full-on business. There was a lot of stress, you know, dealing with those young people. I won a big contract with the local authority, so we ended up with 125 of these kids permanently, with 40 staff, and it was full on. It kind of evolved organically, but I never had a plan for it to become the size it was. So I didn't actually realize I had a problem. I just knew I was suffering. So we decided,
because it slowly kept putting pressure on you, and you didn't realize that you were getting buried.
Indeed, exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. But having to go every day You've got to turn up. You've got to do your job, right? And if I didn't
Right.
turn up, then how could I expect everybody else to turn up? And the kids were always the biggest focus of everything we did. It was, and what I because I was in such a bad place, we actually decided to sell it. So we binned it. It took us a
Right.
year to sell it. Probably the most stressful thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Yeah.
Everybody, the people that were buying it and the solicitors were all over it, lifting up every carpet, delving into my soul for everything I've been doing for 20 years. Didn't realize really how much that was affecting me either.
Right.
And then we got out, we sold our house as well. We bought what you call it an RV, a big motorhome.
Yeah.
Me and the wife, because we were in it together. We were going to travel for a couple of years and just chill out, just completely relax. We were going to go to all the places in Europe we hadn't been in the motorhome already.
Right.
And then COVID hit. So COVID hit just at that time. We finished at the end of 19. COVID hit at the beginning of 20. So I ended up living in a field in my motorhome with nothing to do. So I went from full on everything to nothing for nearly a year. And believe me, now that was something that I could never envisage doing. And it nearly took my life, to be honest. I completely melted. It really, really did.
Well, you lose your purpose.
100%. Yeah, I lost my identity. I lost my purpose. I had no interaction with anybody. Freemasonry all closed here as well. So I literally had nothing apart from the wife. And I say apart from the wife, I don't mean that derogatory, but the wife was looking after my grandchildren because my daughter's a nurse. So my wife was very busy going out every day looking after the kids. And I just sat with the dog, dribbling down my shirt, drinking far too much beer.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah, that's
yeah. What do you do? Anyway, I did ask for help eventually. I mean, it got so bad. Michelle came home one day. She just said, "You've got to sort this out. This is going bad." And I was in a very dark. I was suicidal. I was in a bad place.
Yeah, and I think men, especially men at our age, we need to not sweep it under the rug. We need to address it. It's
100%.
it's not weakness. It's just part of the deal. We were never given the tools early on.
Nope.
To how to address and deal with it. Yep. And I think, as we're going to go into your masonry next, as Masons, when we say we make good men better, you know how? Because we talk about stuff just like this and we're not sweeping it under the rug. We say, I understand. I'm here for you.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. And we'll come on to this in terms of how the fraternity really has helped me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's jump in. That's the segue. Walk us through your Masonic journey from when you joined and where you're at today.
Okay, well, this bit will be quite quick. Listening to some of your other guests that have been around the block, and I've only been a Freemason for 14 years. So I was in the round table. I don't know if you guys know about the round table. No. Okay, so there's Rotary, the Lions clubs, all of those sorts of things. I think you have the Knights of Columbus, those kind of groups. Round table is very similar to that in the UK. Usually for guys that are in business, and it's another talking club. But we always do some fun things every 2 weeks. You stay in there till you're 45, and then you kind of get kicked out. And then guys go off to Rotary and do whatever. So I'm in a Roundtable Lodge. So I was initiated into the Roundtable Lodge in 2011 by a good friend of mine, an ex-tabler. I was raised on my birthday, actually, in 2013. Went through the usual thing in terms of the craft lodge. Was master in 2018-19 of the lodge. And then joined chapter as well. And then I went through the chair of chapter. I'm only in the 2 degrees, just Royal Arch chapter and craft masonry. And then in 2017, I was talking to guys at the bar after various meetings and finding out that people I've known for ages had motorcycles. And I did too, and I didn't realize they did. And of course, the usual story, nobody's got any time to go and ride the bike. So I asked the provincial Grand Master, can I start a Masonic motorcycle club? He let me. And then what happened, it grew very, very quickly. And we ended up very quickly with the choice whether we became a Widow Sons chapter or whether we actually created a brand new motorcycle lodge. So we went for the lodge. So we created a motorcycle lodge, and I had the huge honor of being the Primus Worshipful Master. So I was the first master of the bike lodge, which was just phenomenal. It was absolutely outstanding. So that's going great. And then, of course, COVID and everything was in the way a little bit. And I've just learned just before Christmas that I get my first provincial promotion in May this year. So I'm going to be an active provincial officer, and I'm going to be the sword bearer for Lincolnshire province.
Well, congrats. That's a nice step.
Oh, mate, I'm just made up. Absolutely over the moon with it. Yeah, incredible. Great thing about it, it's not a talking part. You just walk around with a big sword, looking hard.
You'll never miss a word. Perfect.
You've got it. Perfect. Yep. So yeah, that kicks off in May.
That's exciting, right?
Yeah, give me a visit. Yeah, I'm secretary of the Roundtable Lodge, which I really enjoy. I'm going to become DC director of ceremonies of the Motorcycle Lodge in May, and then in May also getting the provincial honour. So really exciting year ahead. So that's my Masonic career. Really, nothing else. I don't do anything else other than those two things.
Well, folks say that, but when you put those leadership roles in here and there, it quite changes things.
It's busy, right? Yeah. I mean, when I had the
Yeah.
business, I had to restrict myself. I couldn't go off and join Mark. I'm going to join Mark this year as well, actually. But you've got to be careful, right? And I was very sensible to try and hold it because you can do too much too quickly and then let everybody down. And I hate the idea of letting people down.
Yeah, for sure. And, in American Masonry, one of the first things we're taught is, how to balance your life out. And
Yep.
Masonry is not in really these top three things.
No, exactly
So,
that.
and I love that. I thought that was, it's a great message, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, I know guys, as I'm sure you do, that are in every single side degree, and I just think, how the hell do they find the time for all of that, right? But,
as a young Mason, the best advice I got was to learn to say no. The
yes.
advice I failed to follow was to learn to say no. So there was a time where I was the master of our lodge, which was the biggest in our state, second largest in the country, uh, active in our shrine, membership chairman on their divan. It's like still running businesses. Like, oh my, thank goodness my wife bought in, and it's
Yeah.
like, you go do your thing, but you're coming back, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly that. Yeah. I mean, that's a hugely important thing, right? That your wife buys in. I mean, Michelle has been
yes,
fantastic. She always supports everything I do. But yeah, she's there to keep a bit of a check on it too. Like, hang on, it's just a
yeah,
minute.
and that's exactly right. That you know, a person's been married 30 years, to
Yeah,
have that balance and somebody to put that check on it. You trust your person, right? Your
of
person's in
course.
it for you.
Yeah. We're
So,
not very bright, are we? Let's be honest. We'll just be running off doing all sorts of nonsense, right?
let's, I'm glad you said it. I've been thinking it my whole life, but you're absolutely right. We're not that bright, but we have to give our credit that we're smart enough to keep the right people around us.
Exactly that.
Right.
Exactly.
So we have to give ourselves a half check mark for that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take that one.
Yeah. So, how vibrant is Masonry in England?
Yeah. So really good. I mean, United Grand Lodge of England encompasses England and Wales. So I think between the two of them, we're something like 180,000 members right now in 7,000 lodges. So the trip that I just did, I was very, very fortunate, privileged indeed, to walk the whole coast of the UK, which I'm sure we'll come on to. And I got to visit over 300 lodge buildings and go to, I think I did 110 meetings as I was walking. So I got to see all sorts of how it's working in different provinces, which was incredibly enlightening for me. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that COVID has done Freemasonry a huge, well, I wouldn't say injustice, but it really hurt us. I think it gave
It
a
did.
lot of
It hurt us.
yeah, and it probably did in the States too, right? It must be the same all over the world, I'm guessing. Yeah, and I think we are recovering now in the UK would be the answer. We've come up with some amazing initiatives to look at how we not necessarily just recruit, but how we retain and how we look after the guys we've got. We're getting really a lot better. We've got work to do. Some lodges more than others, but we're getting a lot better at
Right.
doing exactly that. Because it's the story. You come in and everybody's your best friend, and it's all brilliant. And then the next time you turn up, potentially nobody talks to you because the new guy's in. But
Yeah.
we are getting better at that. So yeah, it's vibrant. It's really good. And in Lincolnshire, where I live, we have 3,000 masons in 76 lodges. Just craft, of course. But yeah, it's really vibrant. Yeah, very thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, that's I'm glad that you mentioned the retention side of it as well. As a former membership chairman for multiple years, you get
Yep,
focused on bring them in. And then now looking back,
yep,
as much effort as we put bringing them in, the guys we've already got in, we've spent a lot of time.
yep,
I would argue this, and we say this on this podcast in this way. I wouldn't invite anybody over for dinner, meaning new Masons,
yep,
until I get the house clean, meaning taking care of our existing Masons. So our house was not in order. And I
yep,
think that the retention should be our number one focus, because if we get our guys that are in reinvigorated, the
yep.
other part's going to be solved.
100%. Yeah, you're dead right. You're dead right. And of course, these guys have got all the skills and attributes that we already know they've got and we need, really.
let them do their thing. You
Yeah.
know, we might be brilliant in this area, but they're brilliant in so many others. So why wouldn't we take advantage of the situation?
100%. I mean, what I wasn't really aware of because I wasn't involved in it, it was above my pay grade, was the way that the hierarchy works at the top end, the leaders, the rulers.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's something I have noticed as I've done this walk. I've met so many provincial grandmasters, deputy provincial grandmasters. Before, in my military brain, I kind of figured them as like brigadiers, right, and generals.
Yep.
And I'm a corporal, and we don't really mix. We don't drink together. We don't eat together. There's something massive happening in UGLE where actually those guys are on the ground with us, letting us know that they're here with us on the same level. And it's incredible to see, actually. I've only been 14 years, and I do remember when I joined not being able to talk to some of these guys, the ones before them, because they were very, very different in terms of their outlook towards us as junior Masons. Not the same now at all.
Take yourself back to the military. I have a military background as well, and you're right. There was always a separation. However, if you were in some situation where you were deployed, and when you have a general come and walk the ground and you get your formation, they come and say, that changes the morale for that month, right? Because like, oh, they don't get it. And then they come and talk to you. It's like, oh, maybe they get it, whether they do or not. But it's the perception that those boots on the ground, that they are touching the same soil we're touching. And I
100%.
think that is genius for UGLE to do. And all of our grandmasters across our many jurisdictions that are hearing that. If you've been in the military, you know exactly what Chris and I are talking about. But if you haven't, you need to trust us on this. Put your boots on the ground, get a pulse of your membership. If you really want to know what the problem is, get down and get a pulse on your membership. Would you agree, Chris?
100%, yeah. And without a question, like I said, I've met, we have 48 provinces, so we have 48 provincial grandmasters. And I don't know how many of them I've met, actually. I've never tried to do them, just on this walk. But a good few, I must have met probably more than 20 of them now. And that is exactly what's going on. These guys are in tune. They know what's going on. And very, very, where they find the time to do what they do at that level, I have no idea.
Yeah. So I want you to tell our listeners, why in the world did you decide to walk nearly 6,500 miles down the coast? Let me just sit back and put my feet up because my feet are tired already just talking, thinking about what's going on. So Chris, tell us.
Well, if I'm honest with you, it's down to a young American man. It's his fault. So I went through what I just told you with regard to my mental health breakdown. I had some mental health support. I wouldn't say better, but I certainly learned a lot of ways that I could look after myself better. I got involved with a few businesses in and out, started a few things up, didn't come to anything. I now understand that it was because they were just businesses for the sake of trying to make money. They weren't what I was all about. My business was about people. And that's what I was missing that point. Anyway, I was I started slipping again towards Christmas of 2022. And I just could feel myself getting worse as the weather was changing. I was getting worse and worse and worse. And I was on social media. I was watching this American young guy walking around the world, believe it or not. And he had one of these trolley things with a dog, and all his kit was in front of me. He was pushing it. And I was following this guy. When I went to bed at night, I was just watching where he was. And I just thought, my God, how must it be to get up in the morning, wake up in the morning in a tent, and have no other pressures on your mind apart from getting up, packing up your tent and walking. I watched him for a while, but built up the courage to mention to Michelle, I think I'm going to walk around the world. Well, you can imagine the response I got to that, can't you? Right? Married 30 years. Oh, yeah, you're going to walk around the world, are you? Well, it never went down very well.
Yeah, is that code for something else?
And it's exactly, which I now know Michelle thought it was. But it genuinely wasn't. I was just kind of getting lost again.
Right.
I needed to find what I now understand. I needed a reset. I needed to basically stop everything, get my stuff sorted out, and then go again. That's what I needed. But anyway, I put the world thing out of the way, and I accidentally fell upon another ex-military guy that was actually walking around the coast of the UK. And I thought, well, you know what? The world was a bit too much, probably. But around the coast of the UK, the coast of the UK, believe it or not, is about 27,000 miles. If you walk in and out of, because it's such a jaggy coastline, right?
Right.
But we have these amazing bridge things and boats that go across rivers and stuff.
Right.
So if you make your own story, if you take boats, if you go across bridges, it can be anything between 6,000 and 8,000 miles, depending. So I just, I kind of figured 18 months it would probably take me. Packed my rucksack, said goodbye to the wife and the children and the grandchildren on New Year's Day 2023 and headed north from Skegness, which is the nearest Masonic building we have here, with just the intention of seeing what I could do to walk right around it. There was nothing Masonic about any of it. I had no intentions to visit lodges or do anything like that or raise any money. It really was just to try and sort myself out. That's what it was. But talking to a couple of Masons before I went, it went like wildfire. It turned it into a bit of a circus, if I'm honest. Somebody said, why don't you raise some money? Why don't you visit some lodges? And I'm glad I did, if I'm honest, because it gave it purpose. I've raised, we're just about £80,000 now. So nearly £100,000, which was the goal, which will go into the MCF, which is the Masonic Charitable Foundation. Yep. They do an enormous amount for mental health support. I can't dictate it goes to mental health support, but it will go in the big pot, right? And then the visiting of the lodges became the part for me that was me learning about mental health. I was reading books or listening to books as I was walking, listening to podcasts as I was walking. So I was trying to learn about why my brain just completely melted. Because, like you said, we're not growing up with the tools for this stuff. We don't know how to, in my opinion, how to articulate how we're feeling, how our emotions are. Just had no idea how to talk about this stuff. Couldn't even talk to my wife about it. So it was more about learning for me. But of course, this is what it's done as I've turned up in places and people ask why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I mention it's about the mental health. Everybody has a story, and some of the stories are just incredibly depressing to listen to their stories. People
and
really
terrifying.
Yeah. You know, and that kind of sparked something else about this process of walking this distance. And the stories I now have, I've got a story to fill a book basically about how I understand my brain now and how I didn't have to go to that bad place if I had understood more about my brain then, you know. And it won't be a self-help book necessarily, but I'm hoping that it will help a lot of people to realize that actually you can do a lot of this yourself. You don't need drugs. You don't need, doctors and all the rest of that. Yeah, a lot of people can sort this stuff out themselves. I'm convinced of it. But it's that jigsaw puzzle we have to build for ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we need to understand that people are there to help us, and we can do that. Yeah. So it was 2 years in a tent. Guys, occasionally people were offering me a bed, which was amazing, and feeding me, which is incredible. And the human nature is just an amazing thing. People that have generally got not a lot to give you everything, exactly. Which I learned a lot, and it was amazing. Yeah, so I've just spent hours sitting on beaches looking at sunsets and waking up in the morning in my tent with the birds tweeting. So that initial thought about, I wonder what it's like to wake up in a tent every day. Yeah, it was just amazing. So I've had that opportunity to reset everything and come back.
Let me ask you a few things.
Yeah.
What was, of this whole journey, not mentally, physically, what was the suckiest part? Was there a time where the skin was coming off of your feet and you ran out of moleskin? What was just the standout crappiest part of the whole thing?
Oh my God! Well, in the weather, if I'm honest, the weather in the UK is a challenge, without a doubt. Scotland, the west coast of Scotland, the weather, and unlike most places in the world where things want to eat you, like bears, and they have these midgie things, these little beastie fly things. They're called midgies in Scotland, and they're just like clouds of these little swining things. You can hardly see them; they're so tiny. But
like gnats.
Yeah, like gnats, but they eat you to death. And they hang around near water. They're just midgies are a nightmare. Midgies, ticks. So ticks are the things that off the sheep and the deer.
Oh yeah, we've got them.
You have that. So yeah, I was getting covered in them things, having to pluck them things out of parts of my anatomy where you didn't want to be watching me doing that. Horseflies just getting chewed up everywhere. And of course, this kind of stuff is what you go when you go on an adventure. You get it. But yeah. I'm in a tent all the time, and I couldn't escape it. And the west coast of Scotland was just so desolate. I went, a week at a time without seeing another human being, just trying to negotiate all the way around those waterways. It was incredible, but punishing, physically, mentally punishing. So I think the weather probably would be the hardest part, and the fact that you're not allowed to camp anywhere either. We have this stupid rule in the UK, in England and Wales, you can't camp anywhere.
Well, in the United States, they probably should use that more to stop some of the homelessness that just pops up on the sidewalk. So,
yeah, indeed, yeah. I mean, do you know what? I mean, I did sleep with the homeless, in various places. Again, trying to understand what that was all about.
Yeah, that's a whole nother segment. That's interesting in itself. So, how far in did you how many hours or days in did you say, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, on day one, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop happening virtually every day. You're thinking, what are you doing, you idiot? I think what I said earlier on about becoming a Masonic process, visiting and raising money. Once I'd started with people pledging money, I got up to Scotland and I think maybe I had 15,000 or 20,000 pound. Well, I knew then I couldn't stop. So no matter
That
how
was your
tough,
purpose.
there you go. So no matter how tough it is, you can't stop because you get a bit wet, right? I mean, imagine the stick I'd get from the guys. Oh yeah, you were that guy that started walking and came home because you got your hair wet. That was never going to live that down. So that kind of made me keep going. Purpose of raising the money. Being away from the family was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
The isolation and being alone a lot, being inside your own head for so much time, that's a real challenge. I mean, that's not a nice place to be, especially the nonsense that's been going around in my head.
Right. But in some weird way, it's therapeutic because if you don't have those outside voices trying to
Yes,
manipulate you, now you can just get in and say, okay, bad guy, you're off. Good guy,
yep,
talk to me.
indeed. And while I'm learning from books, and I read some incredible books about things that you can do to help yourself and about why your brain's doing what it's doing. Yeah, and with that education coming in, and then having the time to figure stuff out that's happened through my life, and think, that makes sense now. I get that. I understand that now. That was just, yeah. I don't think I could have done that process still being at home, trying to work, trying to run the family, whatever.
Because there's
Yeah,
a lot of other outside influences, frankly.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it never stops, does it? As soon as you pick up this thing just never stops bleeping, does it? It's
Yep.
just constant, isn't it? Constant.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that, because generationally, that didn't start touching our hands until the 2000s. We have a
Yep.
whole generation that know nothing without it. And
Indeed.
so you want to talk about a detoxing program. I would
Yep.
think for some people, some young people, if you took their phone away, it'd probably be easier for them to get off of drugs or alcohol than it would be off of a phone.
You're dead right. And you just go to a restaurant anywhere and see couples, families, all sitting together. Nobody's talking to each other. They're all just there. I mean,
Yeah,
I understand
it's
some of the books
terrifying.
I've read why. I understand why that happens now. It's the business plans of Meta and those sorts of companies to get us addicted to it. It's their plan. That's what it's about. They don't want me
Yeah,
and you talking. They want us sitting on our phone.
exactly. Well, so it's on several platforms. I know it was on Netflix. It was called The Social Dilemma. And
Hmm.
these were from some of the creators of, Meta and all of the different things, the guys that made the like button.
Yep.
And it was a terrifying 1 hour episode. But at the end, they ask each of those guys from different platforms and ladies, would you allow your kids on this? And they overwhelmingly said no. So think
Yep.
about this. You are selling a product, a widget. Doesn't matter what widget is. It can be food, commerce, whatever it means. But if you won't let your kids use your own product,
What does it
shouldn't
say?
that tell you as a consumer what you should be using?
Yep. Indeed. But they're getting paid to do it, and
That's their vocation, right?
yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Challenging.
is. So let me ask you. So you talked about some books. Are as far as what you were dealing with when you initially went on the journey? Is there a book or two that stood out that you're like, hey, if anybody's dealing with that, I would tell you to start here.
Yeah, 100%. A book called Breath by his name is the author will come to me in a moment, about breathing techniques. It just absolutely blew my mind. I listened to it 3 times. Somebody Manson, an American guy. Johann Hari, Lost Connections, another
Okay.
incredible book. He wrote a couple of books. There's a there's an American guy. Funny enough, a lot of these are American authors as well. Somebody I've heard about this book. You're allowed to swear on this podcast, right? I mean, one word is okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Incredible. Have you heard that one? Oh, it's
No,
amazing. And then he
but
wrote
it fits my vernacular.
there you go. And he wrote a second book just called Everything's Fucked. And when you
Right.
listen, I listened to it rather than read it. And he sounded like the guy from Family Guy, which I love Family Guy. So
Okay.
it was amusing, but incredibly serious at the same time. Just mind blowing. And it's the way they kind of capturing how we're living our lives and why we're living our lives in that way. And we don't realize that we're just going down this tunnel, aren't we? We're just stuck with this thing, and it's just
You're literally losing yourself.
we really are, we really are, and it's so hard. And one of them explains, it's all right for you to come up in the morning and say, I can understand I'm getting lost in this. I'm going to stop it. Well, actually, your little brain is just your brain. there's 100 very intelligent brains sitting in offices in places, coming up with ways to make you stay on that phone. So you've got no chance. You really have no chance.
Yeah, exactly right. You talk about the forces of good and evil, and evil's relative. Most people think evil is insert whatever your boogeyman is.
Yep.
Evil is relative.
Without a doubt. But of course, on the flip side, without my phone on this walk, absolutely hopeless. I mean, I couldn't carry enough maps to navigate 6,000 miles. It's all on my phone, right? My ability to communicate with my family on a daily basis through social media and everything, used for the right purposes.
Just like this podcast, right? We're sharing it through so somebody, it's like we talk out of both sides of our mouth. It's like, how do we use it in moderation? How do we not let it control our thought processes? Do we use it as this tool and know that this is a hammer for this? Yes, I can use my hammer to open up something, but I'm only going to use my hammer to do this.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So it's about that, isn't it? And trying to get young people to understand that. And that's the challenge, I think. And I don't know where this goes, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm not into all of that. I'm only into all of that in terms of what I understand about mine now, and now my family and my friends, and trying to spread that amongst them. I think that's what my life will be next. I think I've got an opportunity now to get out on the motorbike, do a lot of traveling to lodges. I've been requested to come and do lots of talks to lodges about the process of the walk, the nitty gritty of it, but equally about this whole process of dealing with our mental health when it fails, but more importantly, probably to learn about our mental health before it fails.
Yeah.
So we can actually learn so much that will prevent it going to that really horrible place.
So in our video description for our followers, we're going to have the website and different ways that you can follow what Chris did on his journey. And that was just a journey. Now his journey is still continuing, so you'll be able to follow along. And I'm sure in there'll be some contact information. So if somebody wants to reach out, they can certainly do that as well, Chris.
100%, yeah, without a question of a doubt, yeah. And the opportunity to travel, I'd love to. It's going to be all over the UK where I get to go to visit places, come across to the States and jump on a motorcycle with the wife on the back and visit some lodges and come and chat. And I think that's probably what life is going to be next for me, which is I'm really excited by, I'll be honest.
Well, I'm going to tell you, be prepared for this, because we've had guests on our show that have done different things and their emails start to blow up. So I want you to be as busy as you want to be, where it doesn't start to become that new burden.
I totally get that. Yeah, totally get that. And I think it's trying to keep it on my terms. But it's become something much more than it was ever intended to be. But I'm passionate by it.
Isn't it funny how that works though, Chris?
Isn't it weird, right? Yeah. And when I was in such a bad place a couple of years ago, where I just thought, well, I might as well just take that bit of rope and go and do it, because my life isn't going to amount to anything now, because the business I had, which was everything, how can I replicate that? I'll never do that again. And your brain puts you back down in that horrible place. Yeah, and just look what happens. We can turn it around, can't we? I suppose. And I haven't turned it around yet. I don't know what it's going to become. But
it's the constant work in process, right? The minute you think you've completed, it's like around the house. The minute you think you've got the house in order, there's another honeydew, right? And if we're constantly chipping away at that ashlar, I mean, we're trying to make ourselves better, and we're ever evolving if we allow ourselves to do so. Fair?
Indeed, yeah, I agree with you totally. And I'm really excited that privilege I had to have that process to learn, if I can share that with others, so they don't have to go through that. They can learn something from what I've gone through. And I think that's an honor to be able to do. And I'm looking forward to that too. So yeah, that's good. That's going to be the next stage. I'm not doing any more walking challenges. I fancy a few challenges on a motorbike. Maybe a bit of, see if I can ride around all the Grand Lodges of the world or something. Who knows? We don't know what's coming.
Yeah, you don't know. So we'll kind of touch on this before we close out. If you had a 100% control of where the money goes that you generated, where would you want it to go, and what's it being used for? And talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the MCF, the Masonic Charitable Foundation, we had 4 main charities under UGLE. The Masonic Charity for Boys and Girls. There was 4 of them. They brought them all together, I think about 5-6 years ago. It gives away the most incredible amount of money. We're talking, 20-30 million pounds a year, every year, into all sorts of, and this is all, of course, money that comes from Freemasons within UGLE. We don't go out shaking tins on the street. This is all coming out of the pockets of the guys. And it does some amazing things. I'd be here all night to try and explain some of the things they do. they are looking at now that they are doing an enormous amount with regards to mental health and support for mental health for its members, but families of members. For me, and it's something that's happening. It's not down to me. It's happening. We've got to be getting to the younger people. We need to be. You said it earlier on. You know, if we're not growing up with these tools, we haven't done at our age. We can't allow our children and grandchildren to grow up without learning these tools now, because we're never going to get anywhere, are we? Yes. So to me, a lot of this focus has got to go to the youth. We've got to somehow. I know it's happening. I talk to my grandkids. They have classes now where they're talking about how they're feeling emotionally. So it is starting, but we've got to go a lot further, haven't we? Because it's just everywhere. You know, I just heard a story: a 20-year-old took his life in the next village. But you know, it's everywhere. It's just terrible. So for me, it's got to go towards the youth, 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll kind of, I get on a soapbox every once in a while, but I grew up in rural America, and you know, you go back several years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And the mental health wasn't a thing. And then you'll still have some of that older generation. Oh, the kids just got to toughen up and suck it up. Listen, this isn't a scrape on the leg. It's not a boo-boo on the elbow. This is something internal that you can't see. And just like real life, the most terrifying things in life are the thing we can't explain or can't see. I can see a boo-boo, but you can't see here. That's what's most terrifying. And I think that people need to give it the respect of what folks are dealing with. And we've just come off of 20 years of global terrorism and wars. And this is a whole nother set of problems coming back this way. You know, Vietnam, this generation are coming back in. And then you've got that, but then they say, oh, well, it's the soldiers, it's PTSD. Right. But what about real life as well? So I don't think we need to stop discounting that. I don't think a majority of the people are using it as a crutch or a sympathy. Look at me. There's some real things. And I think if we get the tools to help identify too, maybe a brother doesn't know that they're going through it, Chris. And if I would have been equipped with some tools and said, hey, Chris, before it got real dark, I'm seeing this. I don't know if you're seeing it yet. I just want to let you know that if you start to see what I'm seeing, let's come and talk. Let's not let this get crazy.
Yeah. And if you know somebody and you know the way they normally are, you can notice when they're not being normal. And I'm not talking about, you know,
it's disconnected. They're disconnecting and or they're drowning themselves in sorrow or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And of course, it's just challenging. Every aspect of this is challenging. So what do you do when you get to see that? Well, of course, we have the ability, of course, as Freemasons, where we can just talk, can't we? We end up in situations, in places where we get that chance to just get them on their own and talk, if of course they turn up. Yeah, I'm wondering whether within Freemasonry we've got a role for. We have our almoners that are looking after the general well-being of the members of the lodge. Whether we have a place for a mental health practitioner was a wrong word probably, but I mean we all should be that anyway for each other. I know.
And we don't do a great job. It's always in our mind, but the implementation of that.
Yeah. And when you know a guy's a strong guy, it's very difficult for you to call him out on, you know, you're struggling, mate, aren't you? That's quite a difficult thing to do. It's quite a challenging thing to do when you know the fella is a strong guy anyway. You know, you don't want to be belittling him and putting him off guard.
But for me, I'm going to speak only for me. A guy off the street I wouldn't listen to it. But my fellow brother Mason, I would sit back and say, you know what? I may not like it at first, but if you're really starting to think it through, it's like, well, what's his upside to tell me this? It's only me. It's right. And I think that once we get our egos out of the way as dudes and egos, shocker. Once we get our egos out of the way, we can start the process of rebuilding.
Without a doubt. And then you realize, actually, he's just got my back. You know, he's just looking out for me here. He's noticing something. And I did have that to a point. I had a few guys that were very close and they were talking with me. They couldn't come up with any answers for me. They couldn't find a way. I had to go for professional help. Then they had the answers. They didn't have the answers. They had the questions.
But then it sometimes reassures, like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not crazy. Yeah. Maybe there is something going on and they're seeing it too. Yeah. So it's not just my mind playing tricks on me.
No, and of course we know as well that we are the best people, guys of a certain age, at putting on a mask too. So even though that
we've had to be the strong man from our generation, how we grew up, that's just how it was.
Yeah, so are you sitting around that dinner table and you're looking at the other guys and you're thinking, Christ, he's got no problems, he's got no problems. You behind those eyes, you have no idea what's going on.
There and the problems are relative, aren't they?
Of course, of
Right.
course.
And a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, you've got plenty of money, you've got this." Dude, we've all got our own money. Sometimes that's the root.
100, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. We just don't know, do we? But
We don't.
to be able, the ability to talk about it, the ability to express how we're feeling,
Yes,
to
sir.
understand how to express how we're feeling, it's just so important, isn't it? And the more we're doing it, of course, the more it can only open it up more, and more people will do it.
Right. And I think it's our obligation as good humans to be talking about this on this platform. Masonry aside, as humans, it is our obligation to try to help our fellow man.
Yeah, yeah. And as soon as you have that opportunity, it's life changing for you when you get the chance to talk to somebody who you know is not in a good place, and then and then you feel that appreciation from them. That is quite an incredible feeling that you actually, just by opening the door and saying something, you've helped them, and to signpost them, then to go for more help and get them out of that hole that they're in. Yeah, it's a lovely thing to be able to do for somebody else, isn't it? And people have done that for me. Yeah, and you can't help but want to do that for more people. Yeah, we're very lucky that we're in this fraternity to do this, aren't we?
We are the ability to pay it forward, and sometimes it's funny is when you think you lose your purpose, the other purpose is there if you'll just listen.
Yep, exactly that. Yeah, and open your eyes and see it. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, my friend. Cheers.
You're very good health. Good speaking to you, and we'll hopefully talk again sometime.
Cheers.